Okay. So we have this Mishnah, Shema Avteon, and the Shema used to say, love work, hate acting the superior, and do not attempt to draw near to the ruling authority. Okay, here's what they say. Ahov et melacha. Ahov, what's ahov? Love. Ha-melacha. Melacha is actually, can't be interpreted as avodah, which is service of God. Melacha is literally work, like going to work, a profession or not, or there's no way to really kind of explain. Sometimes you see avodah, you could say it's talking about service of God. But here it's talking about melacha, love work. So we have to, in my book, I go into different reasons why we should love work. But we'll think about that in a moment. The next piece is snai tarabanud. What's the snow? Soneh. What's soneh?
Hate.
Hate. It says hate the rabbanut. Hate the rabbis. Doesn't say that. Okay. Don't think I told you to do that. But it says hate. It says hate. Seems to be hate serving as a superior. Hate serving, being like a rebone to somebody, like a master to somebody. Right? We're going to try to see how we can connect between these different statements. Final one is al titvada l'rashut. Titvada is like yodea, so don't become known to the rashut, which seems to be like the political powers. Okay, there are three statements. Anybody want to take a try at how we connect them, if they're connected in some way? These three statements, okay. So you're speaking for everybody.
It seems like they're not really related at all, but apparently they are somehow.
You could say that they're not related. I like to connect them. Like Maharal does that, others do that. I like to try to connect them if I can. We don't have to, but like these are three things that they said. It could just be three really disconnected things, or it could be. So I'll give you one way to connect them. Sorry. How about you give me one way to connect them? If you have a thought.
Well, I connect the first two, but I don't know.
Okay.
The third one.
Let's get the first two.
So, I think you should be passionate about what you do.
Can you hear Sheila at home?
And try to do your best. Be passionate about what you do. Try to do your best.
Uh-huh.
But then also be humble in what you do and continue to learn from others and as in your job every day. Like I feel like I learn in my job every day and I love what I do. So I don't act like I know everything. Like you don't want to be a know-it-all.
Okay.
You should still learn in your career, your profession.
So can you keep going? Let's say we don't describe these as the political power, but rather the ruling authority at your job, let's say. Don't draw near, don't make yourself overly known.
Okay, so maybe like not to I gotta find a different way to say that.
Maybe don't try to embarrass the head person with all your knowledge, or is that what?
Yeah, or to the ruling authority.
So it could be do not become known to the rashut, to the ruling authority.
So don't get in trouble, maybe?
Oh,
Don't let them know, don't let them, so how does that connect to the other pieces?
Oh,
Yeah.
So if you really love what you do,
Uh-huh.
it becomes a part of who you are.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just a part of your being.
Okay.
And so you don't have to,
Keep going.
you don't have to show people what you know, because it's just
I
a
love
part
that.
of your being.
And so what's the then you don't have to like seek out the power
No,
of the rabbanut.
no, because,
You don't have to show it off either.
no, it just becomes a part of who you are.
That was actually a great trait of yours when you were working at Beth Tefillah. You did it for the right, you really did. Sherry was our programming director for 30 some years. So she always did what she did because she loved what she did and she didn't seek out the attention or like for people to know that you did it. So that's actually, yeah.
Number 2 and 3 actually cut into your work. Because if you're becoming known to the authorities, that's cutting into what you were doing. And if you're acting superior, you may not be doing your work, you're supervising somebody else as opposed to your work. So 2 and 3.
So if you're like hanging out too much with superiors, you're not, with the authority, you're not really on the ground or whatever.
Criteria, the major aspect is loving your work, the other parts cut into it.
I love that. That's a good explanation. Did you get to hear that at home? I know I keep saying that whenever Ted speaks, but you do speak of it in a very calm way. Ted said that loving work, in order for you to succeed at work, you have to be careful not to like act as superior over a lot of people, but focus on what you need to do and focus on maybe the people you're in charge of, maybe, I don't know. And also like, don't spend too much time with the authorities or those on top, because you won't be able to properly succeed at what you're doing. Is that kind of what you said?
Yes, if you look at it as supervisor of a construction project,
Yeah.
you know, you're out to put the concrete down. And if you're acting too much as a supervisor, you're not doing the work. And if you're creating a problem for your work crew because of your.
What's wrong with being the supervisor? That's a role.
I'll
What?
give you the example, nothing wrong with being the supervisor, except it's cutting into the physical.
So you're saying if your role is to do more of a physical job, physical work, then you should be careful not to try to act like the supervisor, because you have to do your job.
And it's not necessarily physical work.
Okay.
Like-
Stay in your lane, basically.
There's a
Not you, I'm
difference
saying.
between being the supervisor and acting the superior.
Correct.
So that there's nothing wrong with being the supervisor. To me, I interpret hate acting the superior as like pretending you're better than you are, pretending that you know more than other people know, not being willing to listen and work well and play well with the other people on your team.
Mm-hmm.
And
I-
that they do not attempt to draw near to the. I'll forget what the word was, but that you need to maintain a certain level of independence and be able to work independently, doing what you know you need to do. And doing what you know how to do without having to always
Pick up.
kind of like suck up to the guy who's in charge.
I also use that word.
Okay, so so it's like one is to do your job and not be like too much, make yourself a superior, like in a way that's.
Well, and that's what, to be like false, because when it says hate acting the superior, I took that to mean more as you're not really somebody who knows more.
You act like a
You
know-it-all.
just act like
So
you
this is
know.
basically to be authentic in the workplace.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Oh, okay, yeah,
So.
but just loud,
If
please.
you were to look at it as, we'll say a school. That loving work, you're the teacher,
Mm-hmm,
you love being with the students,
mm-hmm,
then you have a department chair. And they're getting their marching orders about what they need to do from the ruling authority, from the principals.
Okay.
The final goal for the principal may not even touch that you're teaching students. That there are budgets to worry about, that the more you move away,
your mission.
then you lose what
Yeah.
brought you there, and
That's so
that
nice.
joy
That's really nice.
is lost.
That's really
And you
nice.
go somewhere else to look
Yeah.
for something else. But at the same time, what's to say that the ruling authority loves their work? And the superior loves their work also.
They should love it, I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that you wanna stop when you lose the joy of what you're doing.
That's awesome, yeah. Yeah, go for it.
2 and 3.
Anybody at home want to share something else after Sheila? Go for it.
Mike. After, so for 2 and 3, I can consolidate those two into one statement that I can't forget who quoted it, but it was some teacher, rabbi, some authority,
Ah.
said, the greatest of teachers do not produce the most students, but produce the most teachers. Those who can teach. And that kind of has a meaning that can kind of draw in both hate acting as superior and do not attempt to draw near, become known as a ruling authority. But I want to revert back to love work. Love work doesn't necessarily mean love what you do, because what you do and who you are can be two completely different things. And I can give you an example from personal experience that for 30 years, I stayed at a job that I did not love, but I loved the fact that it produced Parnassa. And so from that Parnassa, I could serve Hashem and I can serve my family. And if I had to stay there.
So you're offering it, you're expanding the definition of loving work, loving
It doesn't
work
have
or
to be
loving.
love the work, because not everybody has the advantage of loving what you do. It is a privilege to love what you do, and not everybody does. In fact, I would gather to say that the majority of people do not love their work. You might be an exception. But
I look, no.
you might be an exception. A professional basketball player or an actor or an artist may be an exception. But I gather to say that a vast majority of people who are out there digging ditches and providing service for people, working in hospitals and doing all kinds of
Interesting.
menial labor, do not love their work. But you can love what it does. Provide a living for yourself and your family. So.
Sheila, and then I'll offer a few thoughts. Can you hear Sheila at home, by the way? Because she's speaking kind of far.
Sometimes I believe that the third person, do not attempt to draw near or become known to the ruling authority. And this comes from being a middle manager and middle management. Like, I love what I do. I don't try to act like the superior. My staff would say to you that I do everything that they do. Like, I'm like boots on the ground. I'm in the trenches with them doing whatever they're doing, okay? So that's what I think number two is. Sometimes think that the people lose touch that are those ruling authorities. And I call them the people that live in ivory towers, and they don't know what's going on for the people that are in the trenches.
So two and three are interconnected for you very deeply. Like,
Yeah.
don't end up the superior where you're ending up in the ivory tower in a way. Stay
Yeah.
connected, stay in the trenches. All right, so let's offer a few thoughts.
I have a
what?
thought on
Is,
number 3.
Yeah,
Yeah, what I was thinking with do not attempt to draw near to the rule of authority was that somehow, and it perverts the authenticity of your work.
yeah.
Like, if you love your work, you perform it in an authentic fashion. And if you draw near to the ruling authority, they have whatever, some incentives that may end up perverting how you do your work. And I don't want to get into it, but there's an economic principle called rent seeking, which is you have a certain work, but if there's government money available, that's an incentive. And then you sort of pervert what work you're doing genuinely. And the incentive is just, getting the government contract. It's an economic concept.
Yeah.
But
That's,
it's about work perversion. That's how I view the third one.
awesome. So we have like a really big selection of approaches. They all sound pretty awesome. Here's a few other thoughts on this. I was thinking similar to kind of what Sherry was saying about, kind of connected to everyone's saying, but like, love your work. And then don't get caught up in power and honor. So that's how I read. The second one could be like, sometimes you get in these positions of power and you get caught up in the power and you're not just doing it you're not using your power to help or to be productive, you're using your power because you're drawn into the power. You should hate that part of leadership, of power, meaning power is not bad, but if you should hate that part of it because that's not the positive part. And also don't become known to the Rashut. Sometimes people do things in these positions of power in these leadership positions, and they're doing it so everybody knows. Like some of what you said, like they get known in the government, they get known among the important people, and that's like you lose track of why you got there in the first place because you're supposed to love what you're doing or feel connected to what you're doing or doing it for an authentic reason. And so those could be two barriers to doing it in an authentic way. I brought one more interpretation here. Here's like an interesting, not the simple reading of it, but I saw somebody say rashut. The word rash in Hebrew is poor, poverty. This isn't nobody, like only a few people explain it this way. But if you read it like this, Shemai Naftali said, love work, hate the superior, and then it won't become known to you poverty. Meaning like sometimes somebody gets a job and they start out really idealistic. They're really impassioned about what they're doing. After a while, they get comfortable, settled in the job, and they start rubbing elbows with important people, and they start becoming more of a superior, becoming more detached, kind of more in the ivory tower in a way, more detached. At a certain point, they may keep the job or they may not. Like their performance might get worse because they stop really focusing on productivity, on doing the job for the sake of doing the job, and they're cutting corners, so that could lead you to poverty. Like that could lead you out of your job. If at a certain point you stop doing it for the right reason, you become lazy. You just say, I got this job, I've been here for 10 years, everything's fine, that could lead you out of your job. And so you have to always kind of keep that initial passion, initial love for what you're doing. There's a text of Rabbeinu Yonah where he says, this is already from chapter 4, Mishnah 1. That's going to be probably in 4 years from now. But anyway, at this pace. But he says that it says, who is wise? The one who learns from others. And so he says there's two types of people. He says, who is wise? The one who learns from all men. The sages of the nations of the world have said, one who knows all of the wisdoms. It does not love wisdom is not a wise man, but a fool. As he does not love knowledge, which is intelligence. One who loves it and desires it, even though he does not know anything, behold, they're called a wise man. Why? He will reach true wisdom and find knowledge of God. Right? So the idea is that you can have somebody who has a lot of amassed knowledge, but if they're not willing to keep learning, they don't have a passion for knowledge. Maybe that person who doesn't know a lot, but they have that passion for knowledge, they'll end up becoming even more enlightened than them. Meaning you have to keep up that fire, that passion, that desire. If you end up kind of just getting complacent and end up loving the Rabbanut, loving the position that you have, but not feeling passionate about the job itself, you might end up without a job. You might end up like not really having good job performance. So I think that's another way to read it. If you read Rashut as poverty and not as coming close to the authorities. I think the simple explanation here, actually, the most simple explanation is really talking about government. There's some historical components here to this story, but they were trying to urge people not to get too close to the government of the time. So don't become known to them. Like you shouldn't seek out. It's really about, I don't know if it's a message for all times, like because being in the government could be helpful. But at that time, I guess it was perhaps not helpful to be known by the government. You should keep a low profile. That was seems a simple reading of that. All right. Oh, all right. But the part I talked about in the book was the part of loving work. Why should we love work? I brought a few examples why we should love work. The first example is very simply, well, first of all, it's not a simple thing. If you go into some religious communities and you say you should love work, they might say to you, that's very nice, but you should love Torah even more. Like to love work is actually work is it's a necessity in many communities, but it's though in certain ultra-Orthodox communities, those who learn Torah are viewed as more of involved in more of a premier occupation than those who are in the workforce. That's a truth. That's what I experienced in a lot of yeshivas I was in. Somebody who leaves yeshiva can be seen by some as not really a success story. What?
How do you think they would feel?
I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's
supporting them to be able to do that.
So the person supporting them has the merit. I'm explaining their view. Has the merit to support somebody who's learning Torah. They didn't have the merit to do it themselves, but they have the merit. They have the merit to be supportive of somebody who's learning. Issachar and Zvulun. So Issachar and Zvulun were two tribes. One supported the other while the other learned. And the Torah, it seems like they're both seen in a like a ideal way. But there's a lot of groups within Orthodox Judaism, especially more to the right, who don't have that much of a positive approach to work. I'm just being honest. Like it's a necessity or whatever, or they're not able to learn all the time. But this Mishnah doesn't seem to be saying that. This Mishnah seems to be saying, Ahov melacha, love work. Work is a good thing. So let's try to understand that. Yeah.
Maybe I'm misremembering, but something I read about feeding the family comes before Torah.
Amen kamachin Torah. So that's the first, I think I brought that here, but
Kamachin Torah means you have to make a living.
what?
Means you have to make a living.
If you don't have kamach, you don't have Torah. When I was at my yeshiva Machomir, they didn't have a lot of money at that yeshiva. That was my first yeshiva I went to. And then once they had a campaign, like we need money to feed the Bnei Yeshiva food for their meals, whatever. I guess they collect the money because they ended up building like a really nice building, but whatever. But truth is, we didn't have a lot of food at that yeshiva. Like they would give us like, it was very kind of meager.
Something for them to be proud of.
Well, I have one more. So from there, I went to Yeshivat Merkaz Harav, which was it was like no. So there was like it was a big yeshiva, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. They had like a buffet from Mahomir, and they had like this if I wanted, I had like whole wheat pita like available. I was like, this is great. I remember the students there saying, this is Yeshivat Merkaz Harav, which is the center of starvation. Ra'av and Rav is so everything's relative, I guess. But for me, it was a good step up. Yeah.
Well, I think loving work and shouldn't we love Torah more, whatever. I think you can't have love for Torah without having just a good attitude in life. And I think by loving work and making and providing for yourself and family, it doesn't have to be super wealthy or whatever, but providing a way of living and eating allows you the time and the mindset to learn Torah.
100%. I mean, I'm going to explain. I'm not going to explain the other view. I'm going to explain the Mishnah's view, which would align with that. So let's explain a few reasons why it's good to love work. Yeah, sure.
God created everything and then he rested. But on the other days he worked, right? He's like, do you understand what I'm saying? So that, like, we have a day of rest.
Yes.
So
Well, the
work
question
is
is,
in there, some zippers,
Yeah.
you know?
God told Adam and Eve to work in the garden.
Yeah,
I know.
right?
I hear that. Yeah.
But aren't people now, the big theme is work-life balance,
Yes.
like finding that place
Yeah.
that,
But why
you're
love
doing your
work? So, but you're still going back to why do we need to love work? Is that what you're saying? or-
I want to talk about why this Mishnah. I quoted a view. It seems to be somewhat anti-work or like not promoting work as much, but that's not the Mishnah. The Mishnah is saying we should love work. So let's try to understand the Mishnah. I just
But
want to.
you say if you go to an ultra orthodox.
And many
people,
yeshivas
they
I was
might-
in.
They would say,
And
no,
many-
no.
In many yeshivas I was in, it was those who could learn Torah were seen as the cream of the crop. And as many people who could do it, the better. Those who can't succeed at that, they should go to the workforce. But you come out feeling that you're not a success story. There's a book that came out really recently by Rabbi Lopiansky. He's the Rav at Yeshiva of Greater Washington. In Silver Spring, and he wrote a book, Ben Torah for Life, where he's trying to give guidance to B'nai Torah who go out to the work world. He's kind of like giving them a pathway to feeling important as Torah Jews, despite the fact that they left the yeshiva, and trying to give them guidance. Meaning, you could say like, "Why you need that?" Obviously, but like it's not just a simple thing in some communities. Yeah.
Your last line in this piece, says that you essentially says you should be doing that which Hashem has.
All right. So we'll get to that. I'm gonna get to that. So I'll give a few reasons here. I'm gonna get to that. So why should we love work?
I'll save it.
Yeah, good. Why should we love work? So simple reading is, if you don't have Kemach, you won't have Torah. The Mishnah, Pirkei Avot says that. If you don't have flour, you won't have Torah. If you don't have Torah, you won't have flour. That's what it says. What does that mean? You don't have food, you're not financially comfortable, or you don't have the means. You don't have electricity, you don't have food, you don't have what you need. You can't study Torah properly. You're going to be worried about.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
excuse me, Rabbi, don't you think this is part of loving your work, as part of being happy with your lot in life? You have work, you have your family, you have
Yeah, it's really
money,
nice.
you have, may she rest in peace, a whole
Be-
list.
Be grateful for your work.
Right.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's great, actually. Meaning that connects to what we were saying. And don't do it because if you're grateful for your work, you won't try to do it. You won't try to become a superior. You won't try to, you're grateful for your job. You're not trying to look for more. I love that a lot. That's really nice.
How much of your day should be spent studying Torah?
So
So where's
you're
the
supposed to
balance?
have a part of your day every day studying Torah, a little bit of your day, minimally. And this is like the shortcut that's offered, but this isn't. You fulfill that by reading the Shema morning and night. But obviously, it's good to have a little bit of Torah, at least a little bit of Torah every day, something. That's why between and Chamar we give it our Torah. We try to give a little bit of Torah every day. That's even better. Yeah. Okay. Another reason to love Torah, another reason to love work is that through loving work, you have an opportunity to do more mitzvot. So I brought in here, I have a friend who really liked to get, he used to take out from every pay, every little bit of money he had, he took out 10% to give to tzedakah. And so he said, I don't have a lot of money. He's a ben yeshiva. He's like, I don't have a lot of money, but I'm going to give a tenth of what I have. And he kept doing it, and he kept getting more and more money, and he kept giving a tenth. And every time he got more money, it's like, I'm so happy. I have more money to give to other people. That's like good attitudes. The more you have the ability to do mitzvot. And so that's another good reason for loving work. That if you have, the more means you have, the more ability you have to do good things with your money. And so we should be focusing on that. Another good explanation is that when we work, we can become independent. We don't have to be dependent on others for handouts. And it is important. Independence is important. Self-worth, self-esteem, and God is not dependent on others for handouts. So the more we become independent, the more we become self-sufficient, the more we kind of emulate God. So that might run contrary a little bit to the opinions I was bringing earlier, but that's a good way to understand this. Finally, another way to read this is you have to love work. What does that mean? That's because work's great, but you have to find, ideally, if you can, find a job that speaks to your soul. Something that resonates with you. So you could say maybe it resonates with me because it's giving me a good livelihood or whatever. But sometimes people ask, like, I was once asked to speak at Bet Tefillah at like the senior, and the seniors, like they showcase different jobs. What is it called? The job
Internships.
Their internship
fair. And like I was asked to speak to them, everyone was presenting different opportunities for the students as seniors at Bet Tefillah, and they asked me to speak like as a rabbi there to give like a quick message. So I read this source I'm going to read to you. To what? To get them? I don't. Apparently it didn't work, but no, I don't know. Maybe it did work. Maybe there's some rabbis there, but I read this source of them from Duties of the Heart, which speaks about like how those students are now embarking on a new path in life. They're leaving the bubble. They're going out. Like, how do they know what they want to do? How do you know what to do in life? So Duties of the Heart, which is a medieval text, he addressed that question. Like, how do you know what you should do, what your occupation should be? And it boils down to like, find something that you feel connected to. You have an inclination towards. So he says like this: every person has a preference for a particular occupation or business over any other. As God has implanted within his nature love and affection for it. The same is the case with other living creatures. He has implanted within the cat the instinct to catch mice. You watch a lot of cartoons. Within the hawk, the instinct to hunt the birds that are fit for it. Within the deer, the instinct to hunt snakes. There are some birds that catch only fish. Within the nature of each animal species, there's implanted a liking and desire for a certain kind of plant or animal. which is ordained as its natural source of sustenance. The configuration of its body and limbs is suited for that thing, etc., etc. Similarly, you find among human beings that different personalities and physiques are predisposed towards certain trades and occupations. Whoever discovers within his personality and nature an attraction to a particular trade, and his body or her body is fit for it and can endure its difficulty, should pursue it and make it their means of earning a livelihood, accepting its sweetness as well as its bitterness, letting them not be discouraged if their income is denied on occasion. Rather, let them trust in God, that God will provide him with his livelihood all his life. It's a beautiful, beautiful source. Could be helpful. Maybe it was helpful for some of those students. I know for myself, at a certain point, I felt like I had two directions to go. Like I really liked studying. That's what I like to do. I've liked it since high school. I was a perpetual student till age 37. That's when I got my first full-time job at Bentafilla. And yeah, I don't know how I pulled that off. Well, I got certain scholarships and like I just kept like degree. My mother kept saying like you have to get a degree. I was like, okay, I kept getting degrees so she'd be happy. And I really like studying, but at a certain point, like I knew this is what I like to do. I like to study, I like to teach. So what are my paths? I can become a rabbi. I like Judaism. I'm a rabbi, I become a professor. So I went and got degrees in both of those areas. And so I'm doing what I like to do, thank God. But I feel like this is what I'm inclined to do. I love learning, I like teaching. So that was kind of obvious. But truth be told, it wasn't obvious to me for so many years. I really have like sometimes I'm like a little envious of the high schoolers who are like, I know what I'm gonna do, or like kids who already know and like they actually end up becoming what they. I didn't have that for many years, but I found what I love. And so I'm not saying it works perfectly for everybody, but the idea of you should love your work is not just to like emphasize the importance of work, but rather it's a sign, it could be a sign that it matches with you, and that may be your tafkid, your purpose, or your function, what God is requiring of you, like in the world. So, all right. Any feedback or reflections on that, or we'll move on to the next Mishnah? Rob, you okay to move on to the next Mishnah? You want to stay in this one?
Move on.
Okay.
You'd
say that.
Moved on half hour ago on this one.
Okay.
Your warmth on that.
Yes. All right, here's another Mishnah. This is a tough Mishnah, actually. All right. Avtalion said, let's put this on the next page. Move these guys. Avtalion said, Rabbi, sages, be careful with your words. Why? Because lest the penalty of exile be incurred, and you be carried off to a place of evil waters. And the disciples who follow you drink and die, and the name of heaven become profaned. What's it saying? It's like actually not super clear. Anybody want to try to just explain what it's simply saying? I was trying to understand it in its simple reading. Like, is it actually talking about actually physical waters? I don't think so. Yeah.
It could be that if they're under like rule where they don't, like the Babylonians or whatever, and
Can you hear Robert at home? Yeah, okay.
where they couldn't speak up about stuff that would go against the government or what at the time, and they need to be careful with what they're saying, otherwise they could be, gotten rid of, so to speak.
So it's literally like you may be exiled by the government or some sort of ruling authority, and then you'll be in a place of evil waters. And those who follow with you, they'll drink and die. Sad. But basically, I guess the idea is like, be careful, be responsible with your words, because you have a following and you have responsibility. And you can't just say anything you want. That's a nice message. That's good. Yeah. You want to say that?
Yeah, well, but it's sort of like you could, I guess the other way of being carried away is you'll drift away. You'll drift from what you hope to accomplish. If you're not careful with what you say and what you're doing, you may drift from what you hope to accomplish.
Okay, and then what? I continue, can you continue reading it that way?
And that you would do harm and it would go in the wrong direction.
So be careful to stay focused on what you really wanna teach.
Right. Stay,
Versus,
stay focused and be careful with what you do, or you're gonna get lost, it's gonna get.
your message will get lost and you'll lead your students down the wrong way.
Right, or they may misinterpret
Uh,
what you hope that they were gonna get out of it.
Does this ever, Lynn, does this ever happen? You can relate this to preschool in some way? In terms of responsibility of the teacher to share certain words the right way?
I mean, you should always think about what you're saying before you say it. Kids take in everything. And if you are flip or make a comment that they will take as truth.
They'll carry them off to the wrong place.
Correct.
Or a two report back
Or
too.
right, they'll go like, Mama Lynn said blah, 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 you know, and it's like.
And then the name
really
of heaven will
serious,
be,
and then it
yeah.
carried off into a different direction. Which is not the intention in the first place.
Yeah, it's you have to be careful. Educators, be careful with your words, yeah.
I think this fits in with that cancel.
I think it's.
Well, I see it a little bit differently. I see not being careful with your words, that you become so enamored with what you're saying that you stop having a message. That the words define you. And you become so enamored with.
You become exiled from yourself.
That you then your place of equal waters is you stop listening, that you keep on wanting to hear yourself talking. And the people who follow you
I'll drink that
are
bad.
getting no message at all.
But
they're so enamored with perhaps your style or
that's really interesting. It's like
that you really believe.
you're giving them water, but really you're feeding them putrid water or some sort of like.
Well, it's an empty message.
Oh, that's really nice.
Interesting.
Who else said? Somebody
I was
else?
gonna say that there's a little bit of cancel culture in there. And that if you say the wrong thing in the wrong way, when it says you'll be exiled, it'd be like this cancel culture thing. And but there's always even those who will continue to follow you, but from following you, they will become harmed also. And that you have to know that you have this responsibility, you know. As a person.
Are you critiquing it or like defining it? Or you don't?
Yes, it's questions.
Cancel, someone says cancel, oftentimes they're like pointing out that that's not a good thing.
No, right, yes. So it isn't. Yeah, like I have difficulties with cancel culture and everything, but I was just like using a term of today, but in just in general, I think like when you were asking Lynn about teaching, I think you have to be very, very cognizant of everything you say, in particular today. Certainly publicly, especially if you have a group of friends, it doesn't have to be a following, a group of friends who all like to be together and enjoy hearing each other. And then, but if you're saying things that are not, appropriate and whatever, you're leading them in a direction they don't need to be led.
Yeah.
And it will affect them, and it may harm who they are and their name in the public.
So Ralph Cook has a lot to, I brought this in the book. Ralph Cook has a lot to say about like how to bring the generation close to Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
So when he speaks about the generation, Ralph Cook died in 1935, so it's almost 100 years ago. But it's interesting. The yeshivas I went to, Ralph, they would say, so Ralph Cook's talking about generation, he's talking about our generation too. There's debates around that, which generation he's talking to, but basically he saw a lot of people leaving religion, a lot of the settler culture of his time. They were very idealistic, like they wanted to settle the land of Israel. This is pre-state of Israel. But they didn't want anything to do with traditional Judaism. And many of the rabbis in his time were very anti, very critical. And Rav Kook was said something like this. He says, like, they're pretty idealistic. Like they're doing things for a higher cause. Like they're building up the land of Israel. They want to come back to the language. A lot of things, like they just don't like Judaism. And he would say that they don't like Judaism because they feel like the Judaism that's been presented to them is like a small-minded Judaism. It's not full of ideals. It's not full of big dreams and visions. It's reward and punishment, laws. That's how they've been presented. It's been presented to them. So Rav Kook went on a mission to basically present Torah in a much more broad, idealistic way. And he wanted to present like a really big Torah for what he understood would be were big souls. And so I think you can read the Mishnah that way. Rabbis, be careful with your words. Why? Because if you're not careful with your words, exile will happen. To who? To those who need to hear the good Torah. If they don't hear the Torah that's fitting for them, they'll leave Judaism. They'll leave Judaism, and this happens a lot. You know, it happens in Baltimore actually a lot. There's like a lot of students who really work well in like the Orthodox systems. There's many who like burn out, and they end up still kind of connected to the religious community, but like it's like interesting phenomenon. Maybe it's in other communities too, but I saw a lot in Baltimore, like students who went through like the strict Orthodox settings, and then like, they came out like torn apart because they felt like they couldn't really be themselves within the Torah.
There was no room for it.
There's no room for it.
There's no room for it in Baltimore, as there is, let's say, I mean, my only experience is Chicago. There's much more room for variety in Chicago, but I feel there's a stronger connection. There's a much more affiliated rate here.
Yeah.
And a much more strong, like, you know, okay, I'm Orthodox, you're not,
Yeah.
whatever, that we're still in the same community. So there's this, like, it's
agree.
interesting, even though there's all this room in Chicago, in some ways, I think the community is much more cohesive here.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. What I'm trying to share is, I'm saying connected to that, like, our students, Rav Kook says this like in a source I brought here, but it's in Hebrew, I'm not going to translate it, but he basically says like, we have to let our students know that they can find like what they love in the Torah. If they don't find what they love in the Torah, they're going to feel antagonistic to the Torah. They're going to go to exile. They're going to leave. They're going to leave, and then they'll be carried off to a place of evil waters. What does that mean? They'll end up taking in messages from the wrong places because they feel like they can't find their answer in the Torah.
So interesting. This brings a whole new picture in my mind to what this says now.
I'm reading it differently.
Yeah. So, you know, from the old thinking that it's either my way or the highway, and then it becomes the highway for all these people.
Yes, that's the exile. I'm explaining the exile not as the teacher being exiled, but the students.
Yeah.
If you don't teach your students in a way that inspires them, that you show them Torah is great, they can find what they need in Torah, that Torah is impassioned, it's special, it's important, then they're just going to leave. They're going to exile themselves. And the problem is with that, they're going to lose out on so much good that the Torah has to offer. And then they're going to be drinking from evil waters. They're going to involve with this group, with that philosophy, and they won't be really drawing in the lifeline, the energy they need from the Torah. What will happen after that? Other people will see them, and they'll end up, disciples who follow them, end up drinking and dying, meaning they won't get the life that they need. And then guess what? All the blessing that you could have brought, all the sanctification of God's name, they'll all be, that could have been amazing. Like Rav Kook was like, if we find an answer to this generation, they'll be even stronger than the previous generation because they're so idealistic. They have so much passion, so many dreams. We find them the Torah they need. There'll be even more sanctification of God's name. However, if they don't find that, there'll be a name of God will be profaned. So you can read it that way. And so basically that's kind of direction I went in the book. If you're able to read it, basically trying to tie in Rav Kook's teaching into that. So here, I say on page 34, if we do not provide an uplifting presentation of Torah filled with inspirational messages, our generation will leave the fold, exile, entertain heretical messages. This will cause a snowball effect. People will think this is all the Torah has to offer and continue in these heretical ways, suffering spiritually. Instead of adding faith, the opposite will have occurred. They will have moved away from our faith. So it's a big, it's like a big musar for all of us educators to try to really offer our students Torah or guidance that will inspire them. It's also good musar for grandparents and parents. You have grandchildren, you have children. They're watching you. They're looking for guidance. If they see you loving what you're doing, they see you doing Kiddush, they see you living a Judaism that's inspired and passionate, they'll see that and they'll remember it. They really will. And so it's basically trying to show them Judaism in a positive way so that they won't end up exiling themselves because they feel like it's not relevant for them.
And Lynn and I will,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
just let me finish one idea that I think Lynn will agree with this, that you're in a Jewish preschool, you're creating those bells that will ring later on in life. That's what you can do as a grandparent or a parent or what, mostly a grandparent, let's say, now is creating those, like you just said, those moments in your Jewish life that will ring really positive bells as they grow up and hear things, and it will remind them and make that connection for them.
I was going to say that my father tells it's actually my parents' generation was a lost generation because they were sent for education that might have been, suitable in Europe 100 years ago, which means Yiddish-speaking rabbis slapping you on the knuckles if you got the wrong answer. And not surprisingly, that drove many away, including my parents. So these words really ring true.
Mhm.
I'll just share a personal anecdote. When I first came to Israel, I've talked about this different times, but the greatest education I received was not actually from yeshiva. And I told you I studied for several years. It was from my grandparents, my father's parents, who very, very religious, very devoutly religious. I spent a lot of time with them. Just like a few memories really stuck in my head. My grandfather, I remember he took me downstairs to burn the chametz. I remember he set up his Chanukiah very carefully, very intently with the oil, everything. He didn't go buy the made ones, that you could buy in the store. He had oil, he filled it up, and he took great care to do that. I remember watching him doing that. No one was forcing him to do that. He just really loved to do that. And another time we spent Sukkot together, and his sukkah was very small. Basically, only fit his bed. Only his bed fit in the sukkah. I remember he slept out in there throughout the holiday. So I saw him doing those things, really living. I mean, I would walk into his house, and he had this he was already retired. He loved work. He worked for his whole life, but I was there in his retired years. So he had this big Gemara, this really big Chasen Shas, whatever. And I will many times come in and see him just sleeping in it. He's maybe ate this really good food that my grandmother made or whatever. But he worked so hard, toiled in Torah to the point that he just fell asleep in the Gemara. And so you see that, and you see somebody living in impassioned Judaism, and that motivates you to want to follow suit. So that's kind of connected to this, to show a Judaism that's relevant. And so those who follow you will follow, not go to the wrong path, not go off the path of Torah.
Hey, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to interject. There's two thoughts regarding this. One, some rabbis teach spirituality, halacha, what the rules are, the spiritual side of Judaism. But others, like Rabbi Wahlberg, used to interweave the Torah portion or guidance from the Torah portion to today's ongoing events, to common events in our lives, and how how he would look at it from a Jewish perspective. So in that sense, that brings speech and words that have a lot of power. Totally. And people think in a modern way about what's happening in our lives today, whatever topics he wants to bring up from that. But it's not a spiritual. There's two different sides of it.
There's many. I mean, there's different people have different needs. Rabbi Wahlberg found he was able to really, he had his finger on the pulse of like what this community needs. He built up the community around finding like points of connection for people who who didn't grow up in yeshiva, you know, who are in the world, and that's like one of his great skills.
Yeah.
So definitely, there's different modes that you can inspire people to connect. I appreciate that. That's true. Rav Kook spoke in Israel about, like, you know, he was also a mystic. There's different ways in. We have to be careful to allow people to find their way in. I want to just share one more thought on that. It's a really good segue, Jay. So in Ethics of Sinai, the book, he says like this. He says, Rabbi, and this is the other side of that, Jay. He says that rabbis who teach modern stuff should be careful not to get too caught up in the modern stuff where they don't teach the Torah, where it gets too diluted. And Beth Philip, we try our best to bring in the Torah at different points, but sometimes, like, if you go too far, what happens is, he says like this: there's been a tendency on the part of the American rabbi to turn his pulpit into a dispensary of general culture. This is when you go too far. Jews do not have to come to the synagogue to hear about Zen Buddhism or Jack R. Or is it R?
Jack Carr,
He was
before Johnny Carr.
before Johnny Carson.
This is an older book, I guess. Or to hear reviews of current books and plays. You wise men, be concerned with your own matters. When it says, rabbis, be concerned, be careful with your words. Be careful with your own words. Like, be careful with the Torah's words. To use Torah's words. Don't get too caught up. He says, teach the Torah, clarify its principles, expound its laws. Should you wander off into foreign fields, you may drive your disciples to the place of evil waters. Meaning, if after a while, all you end up teaching is like a little bit of Torah, and the rest is all this modern stuff, which is fine, you end up not guiding them down the path of Torah. So it's like they can end up in evil waters or in a negative place. So what Jay said is definitely correct. This is basically just like another piece of it, which is like, you can go too far with that, and then we're really cognizant. Like, one time I wrote a sermon up, and I sent it to Rabbi Posner to review it. And he's like, I forget what the sermon was. It was like, who's the talk show host? Forgetting his name. Steve.
Jack Barr.
No, I'm forgetting his name, but like I brought his words, and then I said, and the Torah, we're saying exactly what that person's saying. He's like, you know, Eli, you have to be careful with this. Bring the Torah, and then bring the comedian or whatever, Bill Maher. I had a sermon recently on Bill Maher. I brought Bill Maher. It's talking about unity, etc. He's like, bring the Torah, and then say Bill Maher is saying what the Torah said. And that's kind of what they're saying here. You can bring the other approaches, but be careful, rabbis. If you're just teaching Bill Maher, they don't need you to do that. And also, like, you end up just not teaching Torah, and you could lead people down the wrong path. So it could be another piece of that. All right. Have a good night, everyone.